Yeah, go for it.
So on the first part, it was great to see.
Thanks.
On the first part of the research, we looked at the rosters of the various agencies. Did you look at the age of the acts at all? I'd be curious if newer acts have a different gender mix versus the old ones.
I didn't do that. That would be a super cool thing to look at. Another potential area for future research. Something that I guess I will speak on now. So I started with WME. I interned there, and they break up their roster as contemporary, which is basically like acts that could play a festival. Other agencies did different things, broke it up by genres. So I excluded some acts that are on agency rosters that were not plausibly considered one of the genres I listed. So for example, country music. Because of the inspiration of doing this based on mainstream music festivals, country acts or Christian acts or world music acts were excluded from this research. But I imagine the effects would be generally similar. But no, I didn't look at age.
I don't deal in the live music space, so I don't know the answer to this, but I'm assuming that as a booker, you're the one who makes independent decisions of who you book. So when I see your research, it seems to parallel the decision-making of agencies because the numbers seem so similar. So is there a correlation between those who do booking and the agencies, or are the agencies forcing their talent on you to book that talent?
Yeah, and so the relationship between a buyer and the agency is, of course, complex. And I think you're starting to see with the festivals having better gender representation than the agencies. Yes, you could select an all-female lineup from these agency rosters. They maintain thousands of clients, and so even if you are only, say, 18% female, across 1,000 acts, that 18% adds up to enough artists to put together a festival bill. That said, it seems like sort of an undue burden on the festivals to have to pick and choose the female artists from an already ripe agency lineup. That the buyers really, it is like a menu of options they have to choose from. And so if that menu is already imbalanced, yes, they can do better, but it's quite difficult. I hope that answered your question.
Okay, well, why don't we move on, and if you have questions at the end, I think there'll be time for some general questions, and you can circle back to those you want to, but thank you. So next we have basically this comparatively old man here.
This is my undergraduate thesis. Okay, well, thanks very mumuch for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here. This project actually owes its origin to Alan, who introduced me to Ticketmaster a long time ago when I was a graduate student at Harvard. And it's on the introduction and then this introduction of primary market auctions into the market for event tickets. So in 1868, Charles Dickens does a performance. This is what oh, sure. Okay, so 1868, Charles Dickens does a performance in New York City. Tickets have a face value of $2. Quickly bought up. Young boys were reported as holding spots in lines, getting paid. But these tickets had a secondary market face value of $20. Fast forward to when I started this research, Miley Cyrus tours as both herself and as her alter ego, Hannah Montana. Tickets sell out in 12 minutes, face value of $65. Secondary market values of up to $2,000 in the last couple of years. There have been a lot of hot tickets. Hamilton, Grateful Dead, and Bruce Springsteen are 3 examples of ones that I've tried to buy, which I guess reflect something about my cultural preferences. But anyway, this phenomenon of event ticket underpricing has long puzzled economists. Here's a quote from Gary Becker, the famous University of Chicago economist, expressing his puzzlement. And it's puzzling, I want to underscore this, due to a combination of 2 issues. One is that underpricing is leaving money on the table. But it's pretty easy to tell stories for why leaving money on the table in the form of underpricing tickets might be rational for an artist by creating an accessible event for an artist's fans. The puzzle is the combination of the underpricing, leaving money on the table, and then that money going to speculators. It's pretty easy to tell a story for why Bruce Springsteen might want to sell tickets for $75 to his fans. It's pretty hard to tell a story for why Bruce Springsteen would want to sell tickets for $75 to a scalper who then sells the tickets on to his fans for $1,000. Okay. And modern information technology has exacerbated rent-seeking in the primary market. In the 1860s, the rent-seeking technology was in a good spot in line. So there were reports in the New York Times of a young boy paid $30 in gold for a good spot in line. And it was a localized activity. Even as late as the 1990s, it was mostly physical cues for the allocation of tickets. By the 2000s, the rent-seeking technologies become software bots. It's an international business, no geographical constraints. It's estimated by industry folks that 20% of tickets bought in the primary market are resold in the secondary market, billions of dollars annually. As many as 90% of tickets to a particular event have been bought by bots on some occasions. Okay, so as an economist, a University of Chicago economist at that, a natural instinct is, well, why not set a market clearing price? And the way to set a market clearing price is to use an auction to discover the price at which demand meets supply. This is auction theory 101. Auctions are good at finding the price for hard-to-price stuff. Auctions increase revenues for artists, and they would eliminate rent-seeking. They would eliminate the socially wasteful Bob the brokers of the world. In 2003, Ticketmaster, for this audience, it sort of goes without saying, but the world's largest distributor of event tickets, introduced primary market auctions for premium seats. So here's a quote from the CEO of Ticketmaster. At the time, the tickets are worth what they're worth. If somebody wants to charge $50 for a ticket, but it's actually worth $1,000 on eBay, the ticket's worth $1,000. I think more and more clients are saying to themselves, maybe that money should be coming to me instead of to Bob the broker. And this paper studies this effort to introduce auction into the market. And it uses the primary market auction data from Ticketmaster coupled with secondary market resale value data scraped from eBay. And the basic finding, I guess not that surprising to a Chicago economist, is that the auctions worked. So I'm going to describe the Ticketmaster auction design. I'll go over my data. I'll give you the main results of the paper. One wrinkle, which is experienced versus inexperienced bidders, I'll conclude. And I'll go through some of the details pretty fast to make sure that I leave plenty of time for questions. Okay, so the Ticketmaster auction design was kind of interesting. It's a non-trivial design problem because tickets are what economists call heterogeneous. They value and quality. Another reason it's a non-trivial auction design problem is you're selling to consumers. So these aren't bidders in wireless spectrum auctions hiring sophisticated consultants. This is you and me buying tickets on the internet. So the Ticketmaster focused the auctions on high quality tickets. So the first picture the first 10 rows to an event. This reduces the quality heterogeneity, so it makes it an easier problem to solve. This is also where underpricing is the most severe. The auction rules a bid of dollar value per ticket. The auction ends at a fixed time like on eBay. At the conclusion of the auction, bids are sorted, highest to lowest. The highest bid gets the best tickets, the next highest bid gets the next best tickets, and so forth. And winning bidders pay their bid amount. So if I bid $500 and you bid $400, I'll get better tickets than you, but I'll pay more than you. And this auction design, for economists in the room, bears some resemblance to the way Google and others sell advertising slots. And the similarity is you're selling positionally ranked stuff. So the first row is better than the second row is better than the 10th row. On Google, the first advertising slot is better than the 10th advertising slot. There's some differences in the design. I won't get into those details here. What we show in the paper is that Ticketmaster's auction design. It's not the design I would have chosen from scratch if they asked me how to design this market, but it's a sensible design, and we prove that theoretically. Here's a screenshot. These are tickets just to prove how long ago I did this research, from 2007. This is the Police doing a concert at Fenway Park that I went to. Okay, so what's the data we have? So we have the full bidding history for all auctions conducted in 2007, about 56,000 tickets. We have all of the winning bids. We also observe the face value for each ticket because Ticketmaster would auction off a subset of all of the tickets to an event, and even in any particular section, they would auction just a subset. So we had the face value for what other tickets in that section sold for. Face values are not optimal prices, but they're the face values. We then scraped resale value from eBay using Perl scripts. So just grab eBay data and then match the eBay resale ticket resales to the Ticketmaster primary market auctions. And this is possible to do because eBay data is pretty highly structured. So this is an auction for tickets to that same Police concert. You kind of see the word police in the item listing. There'll be the date and the location of the ticket. So the eBay data is structured enough you can match the eBay secondary market data to the Ticketmaster primary market data. There's a lot of work going into matching these two data sets. Here's one example of the kind of work that goes into matching these two data sets. But let me skip this in the interest of time. Okay, so here are the main results. So this is a graph where on the horizontal axis is the Ticketmaster face value for each of these concerts. Each dot is one concert, concert in a section in a row. So this might be the Police, section A4, row 5 is each dot. Horizontal axis is the face value. Vertical axis is the secondary market resale value. And on this plot, you can see the underpricing problem. Here's the 45-degree line. So here's what the data would look like if the face values were capturing secondary market values. And so you see the face values are all pretty low. They top out at about $250. And some concerts are worth a lot more than that face value. And here's what the data looks like when they introduce the auction. So here's the horizontal axis is the auction price. The vertical axis is that same resale value. And so the auction is not perfect, but it's doing a pretty good job of discovering secondary market resale values. So another way of looking at this data, what is the primary market auction price versus the secondary market resale value, is for each of these dots asking how far is it and what side of the 45-degree line is it on. So is the secondary market value higher or lower than the primary market auction price? And that's what this graph shows. This is a histogram of the difference between the secondary market value minus the primary market auction price. So positive means you got a good deal in the auction. You could buy in the auction and then sell on eBay for more. Negative means you overpaid in the auction. It was worth less in the secondary market auction than you paid in the primary market auction. You see the data is like pretty nicely centered around 0. The mean is $6, so it's not 0. That's pretty darn close to 0. It's statistically indistinguishable from 0, and it's about 2% of the primary market auction price. So just going back one slide, on this graph, there's huge rents to buying underpriced tickets. On this graph, those rents basically just got eliminated. So some other comparisons between the auction prices and the face values. So auction prices are more accurate. We can measure this by R-squared or by other statistical measures. They increase revenue. They basically double revenue in our sample. And they eliminate arbitrage profit. So if you were a broker who got underpriced tickets in the face value data, you'd make about $136 per ticket on average. In the auction data, that profitability goes away. So the auctions are discovering different prices from face values, and these prices are basically correct. Okay, so another finding another analysis we do in the paper is compare experienced versus inexperienced participants in the auction. And the reason we do this is it's an important dimension of assessing the claim that these auctions are working. Because if the auctions work on average, but fans are dramatically overpaying and professional resellers are actually finding all of the good deals, that would change our interpretation of the data. So if Bob the broker is still making a lot of money, it casts results in a different light. And our data from Ticketmaster enables a pretty simple measure of who's an experienced bidder versus who's an inexperienced bidder. We just use what bidders participated in lots of auctions. So here's the main result from that piece of analysis. So the horizontal axis is that histogram from before. It's expressed in a slightly different way statistically as a kernel density. But where to the right means you got a good deal in the auction. And to the left means you overpaid in the auction, again, relative to the eBay resale value. And the solid line is the experienced bidders. These are bidders who participated in 10 plus auctions. The dotted line is inexperienced bidders, and we cut this a few different ways. And the distributions look pretty similar. They're statistically different. Experienced bidders on average are making about 19 bucks. So taking the primary market auction price, comparing it to eBay resale value, subtracting out eBay fees, they're making a modest but small profit. Inexperienced bidders are doing a bit worse. And you see some difference in the tails too. Inexperienced bidders are more likely to make large bidding mistakes. But on the whole, this isn't a story of Bob the broker making big bucks while consumers are getting screwed. This is a story of the auction discovering secondary market resale values on average. So I had to kind of cover these points. Let me skip this slide. So make a couple remarks to conclude, and I'll be glad to take questions. So we studied the introduction of auctions to the primary market for event tickets. The basic finding is that the auctions work, as auctions should. So relative to the face values they replace, price discovery is dramatically better, revenues are nearly doubled, and the auctions eliminate they solve the mispricing problem. They solve the underpricing of tickets to scalpers. Actually, part of what got me interested in this project, a few different things. So one is being frustrated as a consumer and having a hard time getting tickets to popular events, but the other was my brother getting involved in buying and then reselling New York Giants football tickets and sort of learning that market through the lens of, he was then an undergraduate ticket speculator. He made decent money. But I was thinking, oh, that seems like such a wasteful activity. How come economists haven't fixed that one? Anyway, the results suggest that auctions can eliminate the rent-seeking behavior that's really been plaguing and associated with this market since the 19th century, and has really exploded in the 21st century as the market's become more electronic. I think there is some modest room to improve the auction design. Sandy Baliga and Jeff Ely at Northwestern have a specific design proposal that I personally think is quite clever, although it hasn't really taken. Okay, so I started this project in 2007. It's now 2018. Part of why it's taken so long is it's not as if the auctions have taken off in a dramatic way. If anything, they've been discontinued by Ticketmaster. So I've been struggling to try to process and figure out why. And I think there's three potential explanations. So one explanation is that there's a substitute technology for running an auction, which is to set much smarter fixed prices. And this is becoming increasingly possible to do using good statistical techniques, using various kinds of big data techniques. Taylor Swift's 2018 tour was a recent famous example of this, where she set pretty aggressive prices for tickets to her tour. Actually, a lot of seats went unsold. I think she overshot. This is the opposite of the underpricing problem. In Major League Baseball, literally every team uses some version of dynamic pricing. So trying to set prices higher on sunny on Saturdays in the summer than on Tuesday nights in April, higher for fierce rivals and for teams that people find boring. The economics of sophisticated fixed prices is just a different way to eliminate the resale revs. And the way I think of the trade-off is that fixed prices are simpler for customers. They're going to be less precise in terms of pricing than an auction. So Taylor Swift's most recent concerts, there were a lot of empty seats. That's because whoever was setting those prices overshot. She got the wrong price. Not the price at which demand meets supply, but prices that were slightly too high. The second substitute technology is resale bans. So another way to eliminate wasteful rent-seeking activity by ticket brokers is just to ban resale. The technology for this is to essentially put names on tickets the way I can't buy an airline ticket and then sell it to Alan. It's got my name on it. I can buy a Bruce Springsteen ticket and sell it to Alan, but Bruce Springsteen could use different ticketing technology to make that no longer the case. Basically, put names on tickets, require customers to show driver's licenses or bear a credit card at the door. Now, a lot of artists have tried this in one form or another. Economically, it's another way to eliminate the resale, to eliminate resale rents and the associated rent seeking. There are a lot of stories you can tell about why artists would want to underprice their tickets, and this technology would allow them to do so. The politics of it are pretty interesting. It's fierce, it's very controversial. There is an entire lobbying organization devoted to outlawing the practice. It's called the Fan Freedom Project. It's funded in part by eBay and StubHub. Guess what their economic interests are. So anyway, these are two alternative technologies for eliminating Bob the Broker's rents. One is just set the right price using sophisticated fixed prices. The second is ban resale. A third way to eliminate Bob the Broker's rents, I'll call this a substitute in quotes, is actually instead of eliminating Bob the Broker's rents, just grab a piece of them. And this, I guess, in the spirit of academics trying to speak truth to power, I think this is actually one of my working hypotheses. It's not backed scientifically in the paper in any way. But Ticketmaster over the last 10 years has expanded aggressively into the secondary market. They're now the second largest secondary market venue behind StubHub. They had $1.2 billion of volume in 2015, and it's been growing over 30% year on year. And the secondary market's really profitable, right? StubHub's take of any particular ticket sale is about 20 to 25%. The New York Stock Exchange, if you buy a $100 share of stock, their take is about 0.01 pennies. So StubHub on a $100 ticket is getting 20 bucks. New York Stock Exchange on a $100 share of stock is getting about 0.01 pennies, maybe 0.02 pennies, but you get the idea. And Ticketmaster was barely in this business at the time of the auction data, and I wonder if to some extent, rather than trying to eliminate the rents of Bob the Broker, they're trying to get it cut. So I'll put, again, substitute in quotes. So these are three possible alternatives to auctions. Let me stop. I've actually got to talk quite quickly, and I'd be glad to take any questions.
Eric, have you looked at what effect having the auctions had on the secondary market? So maybe it's not easy, but it's worth the police have auctions sometimes, not others. If Ticketmaster has an auction, then that presumably limits the supply of tickets in the secondary market. If tickets are a bit sticky, there's some downward effects on that, and you can imagine affects the price of the secondary market. So if they have their own auction, then more tickets would only be sold at the market price. So I'm curious if the secondary market price is affected.
So yeah, so great question. We didn't have a grip to answer that question. I kind of looked at it a few different ways. I think that the difficulty for us was that the auctions never got that large in terms of the number of tickets per event that were sold. The average was about 100 tickets. The max was about 700 tickets. So this wasn't an economist fantasy of using sophisticated pricing to price the whole arena. It was more like an economist fantasy to price some subset of pretty high quality tickets. So it was pretty hard to detect any kind of general equilibrium style effect on the secondary market. One thing I wanted to do, but Ticketmaster couldn't coordinate it for reasons that various kinds of logistical reasons, is say auction row 3, fixed price row 4, and then just do like tag the whale and see like, oh, do row 3 tickets show up less in the secondary market than row 4 tickets? And the difficulty there was that the highest quality tickets, so many of them are diverted to radio stations, promoters, other ways. They have other ways of being allocated other than underpriced. They have other ways of being allocated other than fixed price. So it was just hard to run that experiment. But I very much agree with the spirit of the question. I'd love to understand that better.
Yes?
Are you getting your hands also on the newer platinum ticket where they're having the variable pricing from Ticketmaster or the verified fan data? For the newer programs that are taking this the next step?
Yes, I think those are examples of, for those of you not familiar with the lingo, those are examples of what I would call sophisticated fixed prices. So the artists will they'll label some tickets platinum tickets or VIP tickets, or use some phrase like that to know these are tickets that are very good quality and they're going to have a premium price. And partly that's trying to circumvent some repugnance or smelliness associated with charging $800 for a ticket to a concert. So, these are platinum tickets. You're allowed to charge some extremely high price socially for reasons economists don't super well understand. But yeah, that would be exactly an example of this, what I would call sophisticated fixed prices. Sometimes those prices do vary dynamically in a way that's, I think, pretty interesting. Any form of dynamic pricing is trying to approximate the perfect market clearing that you get from a well-designed auction. And I don't think Ticketmaster's auction is perfectly designed. I think the purple pricing design is better, for example, just simpler for consumers. But to an economist, if you're trying to find the price at which demand meets supply for something that's hard to price, there's kind of nothing that beats an auction. I guess some kinds of dynamic pricing systems that are auction-like accomplish the same thing.
Kind of a selfish question, but when I'm looking at secondary markets, I feel like a lot of people are trying to figure out how much time before the show is the right time to buy the ticket. Have you seen that in your research, looking at time before show, how many days before does it start to drop the price?
So there's another research paper by Andrew Sweeting that's looked at exactly that type of question. The basic punchline, his data is a little bit old, but his basic punchline is wait till the last minute. I've always followed that some variant of that advice. At one time it was a little awkward. I got like 12th row tickets to see the Rolling Stones, and the guy I was sitting next to paid like 3 times what I paid for the exact same ticket that morning versus that evening. So he was like a little pissed when he found out what I paid. But yeah, prices tend to go down at the last minute, but you're taking a risk. But the economics research that is out there suggests that that's a risk that is certainly profitable, sometimes dramatically profitable in expectation. But I don't know if that's an equilibrium that'll last forever. Yes?
Are you aware of any independent research on Ticketmaster verified fan and its efficacy in reducing volume on the secondary market?
So independent's a great keyword there. So Ticketmaster has made some claims in the media that verified fan has meaningfully reduced secondary market activity. So for example, the Bruce Springsteen on Broadway tour, I assume that those claims are accurate, but I haven't seen anything that's independent. I don't know of researchers who are looking at that. What I find kind of puzzling about the verified fan thing, and what I found puzzling about, for instance, Taylor Swift's pricing strategy, is that to me there's 2 sensible ways to deal with the underpricing problem. One is set a market clearing price, and then allow resale to customers' heart's content. And the other thoughtful response is to turn off the resale market and attempt to allocate the underpriced tickets to your true fans. And Taylor Swift seemed to be trying to do the best of both, of use this verified fan approach, but set really high prices. I was a little bit surprised by that. What I would have expected is use verified fan to allocate tickets with resale rights turned off. But that's not what Taylor Swift's done. That's not what Bruce Springsteen has been doing on Broadway. So I've been a bit surprised by that. But again, turning off resale is really controversial. There's in excess of $1 billion of revenue for StubHub and Ticketmaster combined from the resale market. It's a lot of money at that. Yes?
So do you see Bob the broker as primarily like an agent of inefficiency, or do you recognize, I guess, there's some benefit to a middleman being there to externalize risk for the seller and also allow them to maintain the political goodwill of selling their tickets undervalued?
Yes, that's a good question. So I see underpricing as allocating a rent to Bob the broker. The resale market's useful, right? Resale helps people who can't go at the last minute sell. It helps people who discover they want to go at the last minute buy. So I think resale serves a useful economic function. There are different ways to achieve that function that are more economically efficient, but create less rents for Bob the broker and create less rents for StubHub and now Ticketmaster. So my kind of working hypothesis is that we could achieve the benefits of an active resale market without so much rent going to Bob the broker and to the resale platforms. And so as just one specific example, so if you buy an airplane ticket and then you can't go on the flight, you can cancel the ticket and you get charged a fee. You don't go to the resale market, you don't go to eBay to resell the ticket, you cancel, you pay a fee, and then the airline can reallocate that seat, often at a higher price to somebody who wants to go last minute. Some kind of mechanism like that for the ticket market is technologically easy to do, but I don't know that it's in the economic interests of the main platforms at the moment. Yes?
So I should bring this to a close, but I'm going to cheat and ask you a question. So you showed us a big effect on price. I wasn't clear how much of the revenue effect operated through price versus quantity, because it's really important for welfare. So how much of the revenue effect was about probability of selling versus the price?
Oh, almost all is just the prices. The prices were a lot higher. Some of the auctions didn't perfectly clear, but most of the action is in the.
But was quantity higher in the auction mechanism? I would assume so. I mean, the propensity for a ticket to sell was higher in the auction than the fixed price.
Oh, I see. So I think the answer to that is the way Ticketmaster would sell auction tickets is if they didn't sell in the auction, they'd then just allocate them by fixed price. And so sometimes you'd have concerts where the auction didn't clear because for whatever reason. If the police were both in Boston and in a much less high-wage city, sometimes in the less high-wage cities, some of the auction prices wouldn't sell. Not for the police, but for some of the other tours in my data. But then they'd sell. Essentially, they then revert to selling at fixed price. So the incremental revenue in the incremental revenue in the auction was almost always incremental revenue at the same quantity. These are tickets that basically all sold out.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.